you've never dealt with before. So that in itself is a challenge. But I think it's something probably comes to you quite naturally. But tell us about that. Tell us about having a team on board your boat that you've never met before, because that's part of what happens in your world, right?
It is, and there's two sort of more different scenarios. It's just I'll go back to the Round the Island race, Round the Isle of Wight race, meeting everybody in one day. Hello, who are you and what do you do? I ask them if they have any sailing strengths, if they know how to steer, can they navigate reasonably? And I'm not talking about qualifications. I'm just talking about, have you been out with your family or your mate?
Yeah.
And then I'll try, and this is where it comes to a little bit of delegation. It's just having a chat first and say, hello, what do you do? And would you like to navigate for me? And if you see, by this stage, I've already started looking into their eyes and they say, no, thank you. So I probably have seen that anyway, so I won't ask them. So it's just trying to work out, getting them involved early in the process of getting the boat safe later on.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's about the playing to people's strengths, which in a lot of teams we focus on their weaknesses and try and improve them, rather than let's work on your strengths and we'll play to those strengths. So do you think is that an important part of, well, how do you deal with that if you've got loads of people that are really good at the same thing?
There's one old saying, the art of leadership is delegation.
Yeah.
So I've got to have that experience. I think, well, Neil's eyes are bigger and brighter than Albert's. So, okay, Neil, you can navigate. And Albert, how do you fancy steering for me? Again, this comes through, unfortunately, a lot of experience. I've got 6 people who want to steer the boat. Well, maybe Albert, you could do it for the first 20 minutes. Then Neil, can you take over? So it's just obviously trying to keep people happy, because they're out there to enjoy. You said earlier, they're out there to enjoy themselves. But later on in the sailing fraternity, when you want to progress, so I'm not talking about newcomers and whether I know them or not, but they are experienced. Then if Neil says, I'm not very good at steering, but I'm good at navigation, well, I'm going to then say, Neil, now's your turn. Albert can do that. This is your little shortfall that we've identified, or you've identified. Let's tackle that a little bit, but hopefully not going past your comfort threshold too early, and that's where we're coming to when the qualifications come in at higher upper level, which you're just on the brink of. That I will put you out of your comfort zones, but that's more to do with getting a qualification rather than fun cruising.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and you have done that when you've been teaching for certain. When I've said I want to go into a berth backwards, you said no, you're going in forwards this time. But so. One of the things I'm really interested in, though, is if you've got delegation. So delegation, you then have a management system, because you've got to then check in that people are doing what you ask them to do. So how does that work on a boat? How do you, as a leader, how do you check in without interfering?
Yeah, I sort of have an advantage that I'm also an examiner. So I can just say, Albert, take me to Bournemouth. And tell me when you're ready. So I can sort of sit back and watch you tell your crew, can you pull this, can you push that, etc. But coming back to a leader, it's him or herself. That again, it's not in a book. I just say, Neil, can you do this? Albert, can you do this? I don't want to cower over your shoulder, but my eyes are wandering around. Just having a little look. Is Neil doing this? Is Albert doing this? Even in the early days, hopefully I've told Neil how to pull or push something and shown him, but at some stage I want Neil to be able to do it himself, but I'll still have a little look. And it's up to me as to whether I need to be half a metre away or 10 metres away in case you get your fingers in a mess or something like that. So it's progression, and it's... in the early days, I don't know whether Neil can pull the string as I want him to. So we're both experiencing each other, and how far do we go? Well, that's down to me to say stop or great, carry on.
Yeah. I tell you what comes to mind in this is we've talked before about one of the really important assets of a manager is being able to communicate your mission. And I'm just thinking here, do you ever discuss the mission with the crew? Because is the mission about getting there, or is the mission about having fun? How does that play with your world?
That's a very good point. Yeah. It's nice to me if I just said, okay, guys, let's turn the engine on, let's go. Well, where are we going, Skipper?
Now what?
Where are we going, leader? Hopefully I know that I've already decided where we're going, but it is nice to have a 30-second chat. You're not saying, Neil, can you steer, and Albert, can you navigate? It's, guys, the weather is here, this is happening, let's go to Bournemouth. And then we prepare it, and within reason, each skipper, it is nice to sit around a chart, so a nice big sea map saying we are here and we need to do this to get to there, and it's going to take us the day. So and then we'll, at some stage I'll ask different guys to do different things, but I'll show them roughly where we're going for the day and where we're going for the night. So yeah, it really is nice for me, for the crew to have a picture of where are we going, what are we doing.
So so that's that kind of briefing, the vision, the briefing at the beginning, and telling people what to do and allocating tasks. And something that comes to mind with and maybe this is on slightly bigger boats where you might have department type. So you've got, let's take, I don't know, where you've got a foredeck crew and you've got a starboard crew, a port crew, so you've got your, and a helm, and then you've got a skipper. And you're delegating tasks around the boat, or it might be a motorboat where you've got, different deck crews and stuff like that. How do you delegate through the leaders of those teams? Is that the best way of doing it?
Yeah, the bigger the boat, the more you need to be able to rely on a couple of other people that have experience. Mm-hmm. And that batch of people is generally called after guard.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you've got a 50 or 60 footer or whatever, and you've got a dozen crew, you'll have the skipper, a mate, and maybe one or two other experienced people. That gang is called the after guard. Don't ask me where that comes from. It's probably 100 years old or something. Yeah. And then so you can impart knowledge to your afterguard as the skipper, as the leader, and they'll look after, as you say, their own foredeck or their own midships or the cockpit, with the view that you're relying on them, that they know their job and they can impart their knowledge. Yeah. If in doubt, the skipper, the leader, will gather around and say, we need all 12 of us need to do this, and I'm going to show you how it happens, and I'll delegate people to do it. And then, so the bigger the boat, the harder it is to communicate without, as I said before, without shouting or using throat mics and things like that.
And you do see that, don't you? You see throat mics and on the big boats where they can't hear you in the bow.
Yeah, it can be useful, but also to me, there's a lot there. Eye contact is still very relevant. So if you're on a throat mic, there's no lips possibly, and there's no eyes. My wife's auntie is totally deaf, has been deaf since the age of 12. I might be deviating here, but so we took her sailing when she was 40 plus years old, and with blind people, with deaf people, you obviously they need to see your lips.
Yeah.
I've worked that out, having talked to her in parties, etc., etc. Her communication is fantastic, but on a boat, she can be turning the wrong way. So before we even stepped on our boat, I said to my wife's auntie, "You must look at me whenever you can." And so she would have fun over there, but she'd always look at me, and I would just put a hand up and focus on her. So there's with leadership, there's a lot of eye contact. I said earlier that I can sort of picture people and see whether their eyes are going like rabbits in front of car headlights. I don't like that job. So it's up to me to sort of work that out and say, okay, well, how about Tom? Can you do that instead?
Yeah.
But it's the leadership. You've got to, as you said, delegation. You've got to try and give yourself, the leader needs to give themselves a bit of room to stand back and then oversee those groups over there or those individuals over there. And it's better to have a bigger picture. It's one of the things that in sailing, the skipper by rights, when the skipper can, or the leader, should be towards the back of the boat. So they're behind every other human being on there when they can, so they can see the boat and the whole picture of all the crew, whatever they're doing. Because if they're in the middle, they're looking around and missing things and possibly in the way. And that's one of the things about leadership is stand back, let them do their jobs because they know roughly what they're doing or they know exactly what they're doing, and let them have fun.
So that's interesting.
Do you know the big difference I'm picking up of leadership on a yacht is that, and maybe I'm wrong with this, Adrian, but it sounds like you are always watching and monitoring and you never let go. Whereas in a boardroom or running a business, Neil, we're not expected to always be watching. Is that a fair assumption?
That's pretty good in inshore waters where there's more vessel traffic on the water or land unfortunately for people to hit into. If you're going on a passage from just across the Channel to France or across the Atlantic, the skipper must sleep, for example. So the skipper, that leader, must have faith in one or two other people who are awake whilst he or she can get some sleep. But again, he or she, that leader's got to determine that for themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that then triggers in my mind, because I know we've covered a lot of ground here, Neil. We got time for a couple more, maybe?
A couple more questions, because we've also had a few stops.
Yeah, I mean, when you and I spoke last time, Adrian, as we were talking about coming together here, you talked to me about a situation of something that had happened, an incident that had taken place, and you and a colleague had to step in to salvage a situation that was another skipper's challenge, right? Should we talk about that? Should we talk about handling critical situations as a leader?
Absolutely, yeah. And let's not talk sex, gender, etc., etc. It's irrelevant, but it was a very good scenario that came out without fatality. My family and I were in a marina in Poole Harbour, having had a good sail and had a couple of drinks, as you do, more than tea and coffee. But the boat was all safe. Next door to us was a race crew in the same marina on the same pontoon right beside us. And they'd gone out for dinner or whatever, and it was pretty obvious that they were going to be racing the next day because the way the boat was laid out. We all went, my family went to bed around midnight 30. My son and I heard a great big kerfuffle right beside us, then a big splosh. So we did the quick, what's happening out here, out of our hatches, and my son and I just grabbed a pair of, some trousers or something, stepped onto the pontoon, and it was obvious that there was a large chap, let's say 15 to 18 stone, in the water with all his sailing gear on, because it was a winter's day and winter racing. So he was fully clad to go to the pub, let alone race sailing. He fell in the water. He wasn't the skipper, and there were 3 or 4 other people there, one being the skipper, and they were just staring and panicking as to what do we do? What do we do with him? So my son and I said, well, he's got to get out of that water to start with. I can't remember whether it was December or February, but it was definitely freezing time. And we said, well, who's the skipper? And the lady put her hand up, and she said, that's me. And she was panicking more than anything than the other crew members on the pontoon with her.